Hey Audio Loves, this is Aaron Shedlock, and I'm here to play 20 questions with you. Special thanks to Heather Amber Pollock for inviting me to sit here and have a little chit-chat with you guys and answer some very interesting questions. Hopefully, this really isn't a thing that I'm good at. I can sit back and I can record on my own, but answering a bunch of questions isn't really my forte, so, bear with me, and hopefully, we'll just sit back and have a lot of fun with this. First off, I want to thank everyone in the group. You are amazing. I really appreciate your constant devotion to the realm of audiobooks and books in general. You guys are an inspirational group of people, and I really appreciate everything that you've done for myself and everyone else. So thank you. Question number 1. What inspired you to want to become a narrator? Inspiration. Inspiration comes in many forms. My inspiration to become a narrator, I didn't start out as an actor. No, I started out recording actors and recording voiceover talent. I was an audio engineer for a very, very long time. But I listened to audiobooks and I read a lot of books. I started reading books when I was very, very young. Classics, modern stuff, horror stuff, even some romance titles, just anything. I devour books. I still do, whether it's in audiobook form or whether it's in, paper form. I crush them. It's one of my favorite pastimes. But inspiration to become a narrator, probably the seed, started a long, long time ago with Interview with the Vampire. That was one of the very first audiobooks I'd ever listened to. And that was written by Anne Rice, and that was narrated by the amazing Frank Muller. I'm sure everybody knows his name, has either listened to a book narrated by Frank Muller or heard about it, or he was just a brilliant, brilliant actor. And he did so much for the audiobook community. He basically took audiobooks and kind of ushered them into the mainstream. So he was definitely one of the biggest inspirations to become a narrator. Now, there were a lot of little things that happened along the way that actually got me to this point in time, which I will bring up over the course of the next couple of questions. Question number 2. Who inspired you to become a voice actor, narrator? Well, definitely Frank Muller, obviously. He was probably the biggest source of inspiration. But MacLeod Andrews, he's one of my favorite audiobook narrators. I spent a lot of time with MacLeod. I've listened to a lot of his books. He's got over 200 books in his library. He is another very gifted actor. My old job, I'll give you a little bit of backstory here. My old job, I used to work for a very large infomercial production company. I don't know if you've heard of Billy Mays or Anthony Sullivan, the OxyClean guys. I used to work for them. And I did everything under the sun. I was an audio engineer. I was a video editor. I even produced a couple of commercials or helped produce a couple of commercials. I don't want to take all the credit, I'll take very little credit as far as that goes. But I had a rather long commute to work. It was between an hour and an hour and a half each way. So that was 2 to 3 hours a day that I was just sitting in my car, sitting in rush hour traffic, and audiobooks were the only way that I actually got through that. I did that for a long time. So I devoured a lot of audiobooks. That's 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, 15 hours a week of I was burning through audiobooks like crazy. And one day I was sitting there, I was listening to a book. It was called Steelheart, narrated by MacLeod Andrews. And that seed that was planted years and years and years earlier by Mr. Frank Muller and Anne Rice clicked into place. And I was like, wow, how does somebody become an audiobook narrator? Like today, like now, I live in Florida. I don't live in Los Angeles or New York or Chicago, the meccas of, the acting industry and the publishing industry. How can somebody like me, who is so far removed from all of that, if that was something that I wanted to do, how could I do that? Would I have to move? Would I have to, give up everything that I've worked for, sell my house and my family, my friends are all here in Tampa or around Tampa. Would I have to give all of that up to go and pursue something like that, because, you know, it was really starting to, that seed had grown and flowered. It was no longer, you know, a little seed buried in the dirt. It was becoming, it was getting out there. It was wanting some sun, it was wanting some water, it was wanting to be nourished. So, yes, I totally lost my train of thought. But, inspiration, MacLeod Andrews. Oh, I know where I was going. Sorry about that. I told you, I'm not very good at this. This is hard for me, you know, thinking on my feet. I do a lot of improv stuff, but staring at this little dot and pretending that there's an audience around me is very different from what I normally do. But, so, I was sitting in my car one day, I was listening to MacLeod Andrews. He was telling this awesome story about superheroes and epics and this big villain named Steelheart. And I thought to myself, you know, we got the internet. There has to be some way. So I went home that night and I did a Google search, you know, how does one become an audiobook narrator? And boom, top of the search results was this company called ACX. And I was like, what the heck is ACX? So I did a little digging and I found out that it's owned by Amazon and Audible. And it's a format that Audible came up with because they wanted content on their website. So they came up with this pretty ingenious idea. I don't know if they're the first ones to try it or if they were just the most prolific, but they came up with this really ingenious way to connect authors and voice artists or narrators together to create audiobooks that could be published up on Audible. And I looked it up and, you know, I thought to myself, yeah, I love books. I would love to be a person that could tell someone a story and have them, you know, really enjoy it. I mean, I was always an expressive, super creative, super imaginative person. Not necessarily from an acting background, but, you know, among my group of friends, you know, I was always the one that was cracking the jokes or doing impersonations or doing comedy and that kind of stuff. So as far as energetic, creative personalities go, I definitely had one of those, and I think I could make something like that come across. You know, I could tell a story. I mean, I love stories. So, I did it, you know. I already had this audio engineering background, so I knew the technical side of it. I knew how to record myself. I was doing voiceover work for a long time. I was already the voice of countless infomercial products, Arm & Hammer, OxyClean, Nutrisystem, several McDonald's. I did some McDonald's commercials. You know, I've already spent years and years and years, you know, recording myself and not necessarily, I don't think I was voice acting, but I was performing and I knew the ins and outs of a studio, of an audio studio and recording and stuff. So, you know, as soon as I found ACX, man, I was off to the races. I was like, you know, this was a golden opportunity for someone. I mean, anybody could do this. You just needed, you know, the enthusiasm, you know, a microphone, a computer, and a book. So I found some authors that I created some samples based off some books that I liked, some little short pieces, and I put them up on there, and I started auditioning, and it happened like almost overnight. And boom, and now 20 some odd books later, here I am right now. Question number 3. If you could have lunch with any person, alive or dead, who would it be? Man, I'm going to break this into like a 2-part question. I'm going to say, my first answer is going to be more personal based, and my second answer is going to be more creatively based. If I could have lunch with anybody, it would definitely be my mother. She passed away in 2007 after a very long and drawn out battle with cancer, and I was there for her, you know, the entire time, from the moment that she found out to the moment that she passed away. And she was my best friend growing up. She worked really, really, really hard to take care of me. She sacrificed pretty much everything, you know. And she dealt with me through my teen years, which were, I was a bad boy. She dealt with me through my teen years, you know. She put up with all of my crap. And she was one of my biggest supporters in anything that I wanted to do. She always told me, you know, if you want to do something, you know, work hard and you know, make the opportunity happen for you. You know, you may not always get exactly what you want, but if you work hard enough, you know, trying is always an option. She always pushed me to try things and do things and work hard and set goals and this kind of stuff. And, you know, she was my best friend in life, and she passed away. And if I had the opportunity to have lunch with her again, I would definitely. She knows nothing about the audiobook stuff, you know. She knew when I was doing the voiceover stuff and that kind of thing. She was around for some of that, and she was always very impressed and very enthusiastic about that. So I would love to have a long conversation with her about the stuff that I'm doing now and stuff that I'm super proud of. And I think she would dig it. I think she may not want to read some of the riskier romance titles that I've done. She may not want to hear her only son talking about people's, you know, private parts and faces. But I think she would definitely be very impressed with what I've done. So enough of that, the sad stuff. The creative side. I think I would want to sit down with, I mean, there's lots of people I would want to sit down and have lunch with. I mean, there's musicians, there's writers, there's political leaders, there's, you know, people that have changed the world. It's hard to just pick one. But if I was going to pick one to be selfishly creative, I would want to probably sit down with Stephen King and just talk to him about the art and the craft of writing and telling stories. And, you know, he's written so many amazing books. I mean, I think I've read almost, if not almost all of his books. He's one of my favorite writers. There's a few other people that you know, it could be a toss-up, but I think Stephen King would pretty much win out. I'd love to sit down and have a chat with him over coffee or dinner or just whatever. I think that would be super, super awesome. Let's see. Question number 4. How are you chosen for a role? I'm not exactly sure why people choose me to narrate their books. I know I go about it. I've got several different ways that I actually go about putting myself out there. Some books I audition for. Some books I find on ACX and I audition for. Some books I find on my own when I find out that they don't have audiobooks. And if the cover is interesting and the story looks pretty interesting, I'll reach out to the author or the publisher, and I'll ask them if they would mind if I read a sample of their book, if they would like to turn that into an audiobook. That's actually been quite successful at doing that, at reaching out and kind of finding the work, finding people to create audiobooks with. One of my biggest ways that I've actually generated work is through recommendations from authors that I've worked with in the past, and also fans, bloggers and vloggers that really have enjoyed some of the work that I've done in the past. And, you know, those people are in the trenches. You know, they know my stomach's making all kinds of noises. They know hundreds of authors, you know, they go to conventions, they hobnob with, you know, super cool people. And, you know, when an author is out there looking for a narrator, which is a tough process in itself, you know, they reach out to their friends. And these bloggers and vloggers and people that are super dedicated to this industry, and they get their recommendations. And that's, I have to give mad props to Jacqueline Protho, who has been a really good friend, and she's recommended me for several titles, and she's just a really good supporter and promoter of narrators and authors. She likes to keep herself right in the middle. She likes to take these worlds and connect the people that she thinks would fit really well together. So I love her to death, man. She's super awesome. Question number 5. Do you have a recording routine? Of course. To be successful, you have to have a routine. Success doesn't really come from chaos, unless you're very, very lucky, and that can only happen, you know, once in a lifetime, if that. So yes, I have a very specific routine, as I'm sure all narrators do, or all successful writers do. They have their go-to routine that keeps them productive throughout the day. My routine, I wake up pretty early. I hang out with my dogs for a little bit. I get some coffee, get some breakfast. I hydrate. Hydration is a very important part of the voiceover or audiobook narration process. Water is so important. You have to take care of that, those vocals, you know, and keeping them hydrated is the key to success. So, but I have a very strict routine. I wake up in the morning, get my coffee and stuff, hanging out with my dogs. I take about the first hour of every day, I spend doing my emails, my social media, reaching out to fans and other narrators. I take care of my accounting, my finances. That first hour of the day is that's where I get my head together, reach out, answer emails, talk to people. During that time, I do my vocal preps, my warm-ups, which I've stolen a lot of really cool ideas from a lot of singers. It's just a series of exercises that I go through that gets the blood flowing where it needs to go, warms up the vocal cords, gets them prepped, gets them ready for the long day ahead. And I don't do that for an hour per se, but I do that over the course of an hour. I hum, I blow through a straw, I suck in through a straw to flex those muscles and stuff like that. So, and then I jump into the booth. I usually record for about 2 hours at a stretch. I record chapter by chapter, then I take a really short break to get out of the booth, get some fresh air, walk around, stretch a little bit, and then I'm back at it. But every 2 hours I take about a 15 to 30 minute break. Sometimes I'll go eat, which I should have actually done before I got in here because my stomach is kind of being abnormally noisy. I take a break, I get back into it. Depending on my work schedule, if I am narrating 5 or 6 or 7 days a week, if I have a lot of projects going on back to back and I'm doing long stretches of narration, then I usually keep it at about 4 hours a day. That usually gets me about 2 hours of finished audio per day, which is actually pretty good. That means I can churn out a 10-hour book in about 5 days. But if I've got gaps in my schedule, because I don't just strictly narrate audiobooks, I also do a lot of post-production audio. I do audio engineering and mixing for commercials, and I still do all of my voiceover stuff. That's still a huge part of my life. So if I have a jam-packed schedule of audiobooks, I usually record about 4 hours a day. That's about the threshold. After that point, you start making a lot of mistakes, your voice starts getting tired, your performance kind of starts to slowly drop, start reading a little more monotone. Nobody wants to listen to a monotone narrator. You got to keep your energy level up. You got to stay fresh and sharp and focused. So, if my schedule isn't very busy, I might stretch that. I might stretch that into like a 6-hour workday. But I usually break it up into like 2-hour chunks. So 2 hours, take a break, go back in for another couple hours, take another break. If I'm still feeling like I still got something left to give, if I got a little bit of then I'll jump back in the booth and keep going. By that time, it's the end of the afternoon. I'm tired. It's a lot of work performing, especially when you do it on that level for that length of time. It's hot inside the booth. It's stuffy, so it's good to get out. And that's usually when I get out and I exercise. I'm a big fan of riding bikes and going to the gym and working out and lifting weights and stretching, doing a lot of stretchy things. Try to stay flexible. And then it's, the usual stuff, just like everybody else. Dinner, a book, television, some shows. I don't do a lot of regular television. My television consists of binging shows and movies. And that's about it. I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. This season, oh my goodness. It's literally waiting for Sunday. It's driving me absolutely crazy. It's amazing. Number 6, do you research accents for a role? Yes, I thoroughly research. Accents is my favorite audiobooks are the ones where the narrators really give every character in the book, especially main characters, a very unique, a very specific voice. And when the narrators take the time to come up with these characters, those are my favorite types of books, and that's what I try to impart when I do my own stuff. So I do a lot of research. If I've got a character in my book that's from Ireland, I'll spend an hour researching Irish accents. I'll find actors that I know are from Ireland, and I'll listen to interviews. I'll watch scenes from movies, or I'll watch scenes from television shows, and I'll soak in every little bit of nuance that I can find. And but I don't just do that just for the weird foreign accents, like the Irish and I do it for, if I've got, there's a big difference between how somebody talks when they're from New York, from Chicago, from South Carolina, from Atlanta, from Texas, from the Midwest, Ohio, California. Every part of the country, of this country, has, a very particular way in which they speak, and I study that intently. And I try and reproduce that in my recordings. I think it actually makes for a better story, I mean, that's what I like to hear. Those are some of my most enjoyable parts of listening to an audiobook narrator tell a story. Question number 7. We're almost halfway through this, man. I'm not even sweating yet. Question number 7. How do you prepare for a dramatic scene? I don't do any specific special preparations per scenes in general. I skim read the book before I accept the contract to actually do the full-on narration, just to see if it's a good fit for me, if it's a good voice for me, if it's going to work well in my portfolio, if it's going to get me, if it's going to fill my goals and get me to the next level. Every book that I do is like a step up on the ladder, and I want to make sure that every book I do is actually going to keep me going up and up and up. So I do a quick skim read. If I accept the contract, or the author or the rights holder gives me the contract and I accept it, then I do a very, very thorough read, start to finish. I take a lot of notes. I list out every single character in the book. I list out every detail that I can pick up from the book. If I don't get a lot of details, then I talk with the author with it, and hopefully they can convey, even because these characters are all in their head, so hopefully they can convey as much information as they can, so I can learn about these people and get to know them, and not who they are on the outside, but who they are on the inside, what their quirks are, what their tics, this way that helps me come up with their voices and their cadence and their pacing and the things that make them like really unique characters in the book, so I can give them the unique voice that they deserve. So I don't do any specific scene preparation. I prep the book as a whole, and if I have a very particular scene, like a very dramatic scene, like a death scene, or just like a pivotal plot twisting or a plot changing scene within the book, I may stop recording, read ahead, give myself a better mindset as to where I want to go with it, so I'm a little bit more prepared. Even though I haven't read the book, I might go through, maybe read a chapter a second time just to really hone in on it. A lot of times when I'm doing my first read through, I'll make little notes of chapters, like this is an important chapter, there's a pivotal plot point that's going to happen in this chapter. So if I see that in my notes, I'm like, oh, okay, I need to stop here, and I might go through and maybe do a little bit of research, or just spend a little bit more time on those emotional areas of the book, dramatic parts of the book. Question number 8. Where do you typically record your narration? Typically, I record from home. I have a home studio where I'm in it right now. This is my booth at home. I'm actually in the process of doing a big remodel on my house, where I'm going to this is a portable, well, it's not very portable. The thing weighs like 1,500 pounds, but you can take it apart and move it around. I'm in the process of putting in a permanent solution, because a lot of the work that I do just requires it to be very, very quiet. The booth works pretty well, but I still have to deal with, like noisy neighbors, helicopters, traffic noise, when the garbage truck goes rolling through the neighborhood. Just my entire house has to be pretty quiet when I'm trying to record. So I'm going to build a more permanent solution that's a little better, that's more like some of the studios that I work in. I do still work in a lot of studios in the area doing the voiceover work, places where, agencies come in, clients come in, and they all sit in their room and they all listen to me yell about their script or their product or their thing. My latest is I just found out last week that I auditioned for a project and I got it, and I became the voice of Trojan Condoms. So yes, Trojan Condoms. You can't wait to get it on. That's me. So I'm gonna do a big remodel on the house, and that's gonna be pretty much a permanent studio for me. So that's gonna happen over the next couple of months. So I'm pretty excited about that. Not excited about spending the money on it, but very excited to have a better space to work out of, and a higher end space to work out of. Question number 9. Have you ever been recording a scene and messed up to the point where you had to stop or start over? That is a huge yes. That happens like all the time. Sometimes I'm on a roll and I can get through like a paragraph before I have to take a huge, big, deep breath. Other times, man, it's like, if I've got dialogue especially, this happens in dialogue quite a bit. If I have to bounce between certain characters, like an intense female character, an intense male, or in a very intense accent that requires a lot of focus to really hone in on and, stay. If I'm bouncing between a lot of characters, I'll have to like stop and start, Sometimes the voices start to blur and mesh. When I start to blur and mesh, then I'll start, okay, I gotta really focus on this foreign accent so I get it right. So I'll stop. The beauty of working on the systems that we work on now as the computers is, I can piece this stuff together pretty much on the fly. So I'll record a section, stop, start over. I listen back to it for a little bit, record another section. But I have good days and bad days. Some days, or if you got a crazy tongue twister of a sentence, the thing that all narrators dread is that the dreaded tongue twisting sentence. Certain words, I can't even think of any. Continuity would be a word that you may stumble across a couple of times. But some days I have great days and I'm breezing through it. I'm doing paragraphs or pages at a time with no breaks, or other times it's every paragraph, I made another mistake, or every sentence, if it's really bad. It's about that 4 to 6 hour point. When you start making those kind of mistakes, it's time to stop for the day and kind of give yourself a break. When you stare at words all day, and not necessarily just for pure enjoyment, but when you're working and you're doing it, your mind starts to play tricks on you. So it's best to kind of call it quits after that. So I think every narrator at this point, lots of starts and stops. We cover it really well because we have an amazing team of editors that just seamlessly splices and cuts this stuff together, and you wouldn't even know the difference. That's the secret. It's not really a big secret, but it's a secret. And we all love secrets. Question number 10. Do you make special marks on the books beforehand? If so, how? Yes, that actually goes back to the question earlier about when I read a book and I take all my notes and stuff. I use a piece of software called Annotate, and that allows me to go through the manuscript and I can highlight. It's got a bajillion colors. I think it actually gives you a bajillion colors to work with. And I actually go through, I pull apart all the dialogue. So every character gets a color. And every piece of dialogue, I go ahead and I highlight it I actually don't highlight it during my read-through, because during my first read-through, I'm hyper-focused on figuring out the story and figuring out how the story needs to be told. Once I'm finished with that, then I'll go back through and I'll skim through it very quickly, and I'll find all the dialogue parts, and I'll go ahead and I'll highlight all the different characters. This way, when I'm in the booth and I'm recording, it saves me a lot of time because I'm not sitting there in my head trying to figure out who is who. I can look at it and be like, okay, yeah, yellow is George, green is Henrietta, green is the guy from Ireland, the stupid guy from Ireland, So that's what I do. That's one of my tricks. I think a lot of I think I picked that up from some other narrator Q&As or suggestions from other narrators. And it works fantastic. If you're a narrator, watching this, listening to it, I would definitely recommend doing that. It actually saves, it's a little bit of extra prep time, but it makes your records super, super fast. Do you drink? Question number 11. Do you drink while narrating? Of course. Who doesn't drink while they're narrating? But only water. I drink coffee in the morning. I might drink a little bit of coffee during my breaks, but while I'm narrating, it's strictly water. If you drink alcohol, even the night before, alcohol dehydrates you severely, which wreaks havoc on your vocal cords and wreaks havoc on the entire recording process. The one thing that a narrator really doesn't want in their recordings is a lot of mouth noise and a lot of clicks. Listeners don't want to spend time listening to someone in their ear. So you have to stay hydrated. You have to drink a lot of water, and that's what cures that from happening. Of course, there's the random pop or a click here and there, but thankfully we have just an amazing editorial team that a lot of narrators use that takes care of that kind of stuff for us and cleans it up and makes our work just sound phenomenal. Amanda Rose Smith, who does several of my books, is absolutely amazing. I love her to death. She has to be one of the best audio engineers I've ever worked with. Even on the audio engineer side, she's really, really good at her job. Detail-oriented and just amazing. Amanda Rose Smith, I love you! Question number 12. How many times do you need to read a chapter to say, I'm okay to do it? And how many times do you need to read a steamy sex scene? Alright, this is where I might be a little bit different from other narrators. I only have to read a chapter once. If it's a very dramatic chapter, twice, like we talked about before. Steamy sex scenes. Remember when I told you about how I kind of lose myself in books and, I drop into the landscape, or I become the characters, or I just lose touch with reality. Steamy sex scenes. I don't know why this happens, or how this happened to me, or if I'm just special, or if I'm just weird. Sex scenes are the only types of scenes where I will read literally from start to finish in one take. As soon as it kind of the characters start getting hyper emotional and physical, I just kind of go into this mellowy, yoga-y, kind of trancey dream state, and I don't even really see the words on the page anymore. I start narrating. I picture everything that's happening in my head, and I go with it. I go with this weird flow, and usually I'll only start and stop if there's like a really weird word in there, a typo maybe in the copy, or it's just a very awkward cadence of words. The most awkward cadence of words for me is WWWs, who, when, wheres. Those tear me up. That's usually every time I get to one of those, if I'm not prepped for it, it's an enemy's up, cut, start, go back to the beginning, start over again, take a second to think about it and go. But steamy sex scenes for me are one-take wonders. I think the longest that I've actually read without having to start and stop is probably 3 to 4 pages. Yeah, about 3 to 4 pages. And that was during a steamy sex scene, and I believe that was for the book Richard's Reign. There were some very intelligent, very well-written scenes in that book. Vanessa Fewings was the author, and she did such an amazing job of really making all the sexual content inside of the book very, very classy. And those books were really, really super steamy hot, and I'd just get into the zone, start reading those chapters. It would end. I'd take a break and kind of go back to the rest of the book. But those steamy chapters, man, it's one-take wonder for me, for the most part. Very rarely do I have any starts and stops in those kind of scenes. I hone in, go into my weird yoga place, and just read the words. Unless there's something really awkward in the scene, which I haven't actually found. I'm pretty surprised. Not in a book that I've narrated. I've found some awkward scenes in books that I've done a skim read through where I didn't actually accept the contract, where maybe the scene wasn't really written quite as well as some of the authors that I've actually worked with. But yeah, if a scene's really awkward, or someone says something really out of character, or just says something really weird during a scene, that might pull me out of it. But man, I really do love reading sex scenes. I don't know why. I just love it. Question number 13. Okay, does it get interesting when narrating a hot sex scene? Well, I think I just answered that, but I'll go ahead and I'll reiterate. Hell yes, it gets interesting. Although my favorite parts of a story are the characters and the story itself and the journey that the characters take from the beginning of the book, point A, to the end of the book, I call it point C because there's always a middle part in there. This arc, that's usually my favorite part of the story, the plot and the characters. But man, I do love the sex scenes. I think they're pivotal to... My stomach is going... I need to take a break. Nah, go eat. My stomach digests itself. I think the sex scenes are pivotal to a romance book, because that's what people want to see, and they want to hear, and they want to feel that emotional connection, that physical emotional connection between the characters, and that's where those sex scenes come in. It's the ultimate, connection. Beautiful, love them. Question number 14. How long does it typically take to produce an audiobook? That's all over the board. Each narrator has their own process. I spend a lot of time in preparation, so I don't have to spend a lot of time actual recording. I only narrate books. I don't edit them. I don't proof them. And I don't master them. I have a separate group of people that actually takes care of all that for me. And that, I like the separation that gives me. I like to focus on the narration and the performance and the actual recording of the technical side of the recording of it to make sure everything sounds fantastic and the performance is super top-notch, and I'm telling a really good story. I forgot the question. I forgot my question. I'm lost. I told you I'm not good at this. It's improv stuff. I'm actually pretty good at comedy improv, but it's totally different. How long does it typically take to produce an audiobook? Anywhere from, it takes me about 1.5 to 2 hours to record 1 hour of an audiobook on average. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's a little bit slow. If there's a ton of dialogue and I have to bounce between a lot of characters and I have to stop and start and go back and reference dialogue samples that I recorded for myself as a reference, then it takes it might take a couple hours per finished hour, but that's about the basic rule. A 10-hour book takes about 15 to 20 hours to record. That doesn't include my prep work. I spend a lot of time in the preparation phase whenever I accept a book. So yeah, I hope that answers the question, right? If not, you can always comment on this video and then I'll come back and I'll make corrections. Question number 15. Do you have go-to character voices, or do you base them on the character descriptions in the book? Well, I definitely have one go-to character voice, and that's my voice. The voice of my lead, which is always me. That's a go-to character voice. But with that being said, every character deserves their own voice. Every character is different. There are no two characters that are always the same. They might be similar. Like these two characters might be alphas, but each one is going to do things a little bit different. Their cadence might be a little bit different. Their pace might be a little bit different. So I think every character has their own unique voice. Even though it might be a little bit similar, this character may roll his R's a little bit, or he may pop some of his consonants a little harder, or he might be a little bit slower, or he might be a little bit more deeper and gravelly, or he may be a little tougher. It all depends on what I pick up when I read the story, what I pick up about the character when I read the story. That creates the voice inside my head, and that's the voice that I record, and that's the voice that you end up hearing in the finished audiobook. So, I do have a couple of really go-to villains, though. I have this weird obsession, fascination with Paul Giamatti. I love his voice, and I've sampled his tone and his cadence for several characters just because you can get so villainous with somebody like Paul Giamatti. That character just sounds like a real asshole, So I guess I do have some go-to character voices, but I have a go-to voice, like a starting point, and then I apply everything that I learn about the characters as I read the book. Question number 16. Do you do all your own proofing, editing, and mastering? I answered that before. No, I sure don't. It's not. I would much rather be starting the preparation of a new title rather than doing the editing, the proofing, the mastering. I don't think anyone should really do that. You're too close to your own work. You've already spent all this time recording it and narrating it and prepping it, that if you go through and you try and proof and edit and master, Something is going to get lost in translation along the way. It's better to have a fresh set of ears on your... That was a big rumble. Holy moly. It's best to have a fresh set of ears on your work, and to be hypercritical. I would much rather have somebody besides me listen to it and tell me when I've made a mistake, and tell me the very particular areas that I need to work on, or tell me areas that have to be fixed, that are ruining the story or detracting from the story. So I push all that to an incredible group of people, and they make my stuff sound amazing. Amazing! Man, my stomach is going crazy. Question number 17. How many edits do you go through? How many edits? Usually just one edit. I go ahead and I narrate everything. I record it. I upload it to the team of people or the person that takes care of the proofing and the editing. Once they get through the book, they give me a list of all the mistakes that I made, and then I go through and I re-record each one of those sections. I make sure that the tone and the cadence and everything matches up perfectly to what it was, so they can just drop those little bits and pieces, kind of like a puzzle, back into the finished audiobook. It's surprising, like how many pickups you have to do. Sometimes it's 50, sometimes it's 100. Just depends on how focused you were on the material when you were reading, and how it's very easy to make mistakes, and it's very easy to flip words in a sentence, or to mispronounce something. That happens all the time. So, question number 18. Who is your favorite character? You can only pick one. Why? Come on, Heather, Amber, Paulette, why are you doing this to me? You can't pick one character. They're all like your children. They're like your babies. You can't pick your favorite kid, even though we do. We do. I know. I'm not a parent myself, but I'm a dog parent. And I have my favorite. Favorite character. It's tough because I like each character for a different reason. One of my favorite characters is Richard from Richard's Reign, and that was because he was one of my first really, really well-written, amazing characters in an audiobook that I was producing. That guy was cool, and he was broken, and he had issues, but he was in a position of power. He was the manager of a big fetish club in Los Angeles, so he had this position of power, so he had to hide the brokenness, that he had within him, and he had to portray this very strong personality. He was a super cool character. I loved playing him. But then again, one of my favorite characters is West, from the book called West Mosley. He was this very, very old, paranormal, kind of like a werewolf, kind of a creature. Not a werewolf, but something very, very similar. He was called a Dark Dweller in that book. And he had picked up this southern accent, and he was charming, and he was alpha, and he was cool, and he was cocky. And, he knew how to please a woman, and he loved women, and he was just a super cool... He reminded me so much of... I don't know if you've watched Lost. When you got Sawyer in Lost, he reminded me so much of Sawyer that I pretty much based that entire character around the character of Sawyer in Lost. And I think if I was going to have to say, if I had a favorite among them all, it would probably be West. But that's a very, it just depends on how I'm feeling. Right now I'm feeling like West, because Sawyer was one of my favorite characters in Lost. I might say West, but if you were to ask me 10 minutes from now, I would say Richard from Richard's Reign, or Jax from Jax, who was this super badass alpha MMA world champion fighter who was just, super rough and tumble guy. I'm not going to pick a favorite, no. That's what I choose. I love all my characters equally. I'm lying. All right. Question number 19. What do you do to celebrate after you finish a book and or a series? I have a drink. I don't drink while I'm narrating. Not the night before, not the day of. You just can't do it. The dehydration is really a big deal. It wreaks havoc in your recordings. So I don't drink. So when I'm finished with the series and I've got a break, whether it's a day or a couple of days, I usually try and take at least a day or two break in between recording different pieces. I mean, that's not even true. Some days I'll finish a book in the same day and just jump right into the next one. Depends how busy I am. But when I finish a book and I do have some time to kill, I usually take a break. I drink a nice whiskey, bourbon, whiskey and Coke, whiskey and soda, whiskey and ginger beer. I was a big fan. But I did adult a little bit this year, and I actually drank some of my first bourbon with no Coke, just on the rocks, and it was good. It was super smooth. But usually when I'm having that drink, I'm grabbing the next book that I'll be working on, and I begin the preparation for it. So I'll have a nice whiskey and Coke or a bourbon and start my prep for my next project. If anybody wants to buy me a really good bourbon, I am not selective and or picky. I love them all. And this is it. This is the big one. This is question number 20. Do you listen to audios? And if you do, which are your favorite books? Hell yes, I listen to Hell yes, I listen to audios. If I am not at home, if I'm at the gym, if I'm in my car, I'm listening to audiobooks. I crush them. I have a massive Audible library. It's pretty much my go-to thing is Audible. I have a massive Audible library. Right now I am listening to, I just finished up my second listen through of Richard Kadri's, oh no, I can't remember the title of the book. He has so many books in the Sandman Slim series, book number 9. And I know it's not called The Perdition Road because that was the last book, and I can't remember the actual name of his most current book. Sandman Slim series, book number 9, narrated by MacLeod Andrews, an absolutely brilliant book. I loved it. It reminded me of a spaghetti western meets Mad Max, but more spaghetti western. It was cool. I really love that series. I love Richard Kadri's work, and I love the fact that MacLeod Andrews narrates that entire series. He's amazing. But I finished that one. I jumped on to Anne of Avonlea. No, is it Anne of Avonlea? Laurel Schroder's latest audiobook. I think it was Anne of Avonlea. I think was the name of the book. That could be the name of the TV show that the book is based. The TV show that is based on the book. That was an amazing. She did such a good job on that, and super amazing. I recommend that if you want a super nice light classic read. She did such a great job on that book. What else am I listening to right now? I just downloaded some new ones. I downloaded some short stories from a new author. I can't remember his name. It was Jim something. It was a recommendation from another narrator. I'm not good with like remembering names and places and stuff. But trying to remember the most recent stuff. And I can't. So that's that. Favorite audiobook of all time? Favorite audiobooks of all time. It's probably going to be one of Frank Muller's. It's either going to be Interview with the Vampire or It or The Regulators. These are all Stephen King books. The Dark Tower series was amazing. They just recently redid George Goodall. Frank Muller did, I think, the first 3 or 4 books, and then George Goodall picked it up after Frank Muller had his motorcycle accident and wasn't able to work anymore. But I think George Goodall finally reread and re-narrated the entire series at this point. So George Goodall is another amazing, amazing narrator. I don't know if I have a favorite audiobook per se, but I do have you know what? I'm going to give you an entire list of like some of my favorite narrators and the people that really inspired me to do what I do. Goes back to the original question. So on top, we've already talked about Frank Muller and MacLeod Andrews. Jonathan Davis is a superb, superb narrator. I'm a huge Star Wars geek, and he narrates several of the books in the Star Wars catalog. And his work is just, he is a phenomenal, his narration style is so unique and so particular. I mean, it's fantastic. As far as storytellers go, he's one of the best storytellers, hands down. Jeffrey Kafer. I'm a big fan of Daniel Aronson, his sci-fi books, and Jeffrey Kafer narrates several of those, and he does a phenomenal job. A different style, but he's one of the snarkiest, one of the coolest audiobook narrators that I know. Tim Gerard Reynolds is another. He is either from England or Scotland or Ireland. I can't quite. His accent shifts during his narration, so I'm not sure exactly where he's from, but he lives in New York. I definitely know that. He's narrated tons of books, probably over 100 books, but he narrated a series that I absolutely loved. And if I was going to say I had a favorite audiobook, I think the Red Rising trilogy would have to be. I'm going to count those as one audiobook, because that trilogy, that story was so amazing. The Red Rising trilogy, narrated by Tim Gerard Reynolds. Look it up. It is a phenomenal bit of it's like a blend of Star Wars meets Rome or Gladiator. It is just brilliant. Fisher Stevens, one of my favorite kind of dryish comedic narrators. He does a lot of Christopher Moore's books, and Christopher Moore's writing style is so funny and humorous, and Fisher Stevens totally pulls that off. Susan Bennett, she's probably my favorite female narrator. She does some Christopher Moore books, and she's also actually, I don't know if anybody knows this, she used to be, I don't know if she currently is, but she is the voice of Siri. But she narrated The Blood-Sucking Fiends, is I think the series that Christopher Moore did, and oh my goodness, her voice is, some of the characters that she came up with. She has the best angst-ridden gothic teenager voice I have ever heard, hands down. One of the characters in that series is really funny. I think one of the lines in that series was Pippi Gothstockings or something like that. It's just hilarious. Abby Normal was the girl's name. That was the character's name. And if you want to just laugh your ass off and just really listen to somebody really tell a really good story, listen to Christopher Moore's Blood-Sucking Fiends series, narrated by Susan Bennett. Oliver Wyman is another fantastic. I love the way he tells stories. And then there's several actors that I really love. I just love them as actors, and I also love them as audiobook narrators. Zachary Quinto just recently narrated a John Scalzi piece called The Dispatcher, and I had never heard... I love him as an actor. I'd never heard him do an audiobook, but as soon as I saw it on Audible, I was like, oh, I'm getting that. I want to hear it. He did a fantastic job. He's not a big, unique voice kind of a guy, but just as far as just telling a story and just his voice in general is just super amazing. I have to give shout-outs to some other narrators that I know personally through social media, some in person, mostly in social media. Aaron DeWard, Noah Levine, Jeffrey Kafer, I think I already mentioned him. Amazing people. Laurel Schroder, who also narrates as Tracy Marks. She's super, super, super awesome. Aaron Mallon, it's Kai Kennecott, Wen Ross, fantastic. Their work as a duet couple, and just their work in general in the romance genres and other genres. I've only listened to some of their romance titles, and they do just a superb job. Zachary Weber is really good. He's got a very unique kind of style. Sebastian York, the king of oral sex. How can you listen to romance audiobooks and not spend a significant amount of time listening to his stuff? Andy Arndt is another amazing. I'm gonna stop there because I could keep rattling on about awesome, fantastic narrators until the cows come home. And I think of this video is 54 minutes. Oh, okay. I think I stretched that out a little too long. But anyways. Audio Loves and Heather Amber Pollock, thank you very much for inviting me to do this video and answer some questions and play 20 questions with everyone. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye!